everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. In this video, I'm going to talk about and review a game that has been on my radar for a long time. I'm very excited to talk about Rise and Fall. This is a game by Christoph Bollinger, who the only game that I've heard of from him has been Archipelago, which is not a game that I have played yet. I've heard it's very interactive, and Rise and Fall is no different. This is a 2024 release that was kickstarted in 2023, and that's when I first heard about it. And it was around the same time that I was playing and learning Roads and Boats, right? The Splotter game, where it's very much a logistical pattern of building out routes and putting out different units and buildings and finding the most efficient way to reach your goals and establish an empire or a civilization in a more logistical and abstract way. I'll start off by saying that, and I've mentioned this many times in my videos, that games that remind me of the past, like Age of Empires 2, not only was kind of a civ game in and of itself with tech trees, with competition and military might, but it was also kind of a resource management game where you could trade with your opponents or allies. You can form alliances. You can interact with other players in the way that made positive interaction interesting when it came to trading and getting resources, right? So that's what led me to really enjoy Roads and Boats, and that's what made me very excited to try Rise and Fall. Now, I did not back it at the time, and I've heard that there have been some issues with the game and the company itself, providing copies or help, etc. Right? And I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the game itself. So, as a quick overview, this game is somewhat of an abstracted game where you are placing different units onto a modular board. The first half of the game is setting up this board randomly, or you could set it up randomly, but you can also draft the pieces and place them where you desire. So everyone chips in and places this game board in a manner that is determined by the players. But then the second half of the game is you placing these units on and then playing a card representing that unit and being able to take one of the several actions listed on that card for every single unit that you desire to activate on the board at that time. A lot of the time you are moving these units around the board. You are converting these units from one type to another. For example, nomads, the horse and buggy and cart type of units, can turn into cities, they can turn into ships, etc. Cities, they can turn into the people who ride on tigers for some reason, So there are, and then once you acquire a unit, you can acquire that card from your deck and add that to your hand to be able to play actions that are specific to that character. The goal of this game is to go around moving these characters, activating them once at a time, and I should say once you activate them all, you retrieve all the cards back to your hand and you can choose which units and cards to activate again. And the goal of this game is to get out as many of one type of unit as possible to claim a trophy. And when you do, you get points at the end of the game for that, but you also progress towards ending the game as however many trophies are required or acquired, that therefore will trigger the end of the game, and whoever has the most points wins, based off a variety of aspects such as points from trophies, area majority. If you control a single type of land with a certain type of unit or units combined, you will get points for that as well. And then on top of all of that, this game can be further modulated with different guilds or asymmetric player powers that you can have one or multiple of to create different ways to score, or different ways to kind of break the rules and be more efficient during the game. There are also different modules that use structures and other bonuses where, like, if you build next to this building on the board, you gain certain extra points, etc. And so there's a plethora of additions that you can add to the base game in terms of player asymmetry and central board goals and objectives, things like that. So So that's an overview of the game. Let's get into the comparisons. And first of all, I guess there's one comparison that I can make, and that's to Roads and Boats, right? And so the major comparison, of course, is the logistical nature of both games, where you have a modular board and you start with a couple of resources, a couple of units, and you're moving them along and activating them as you go along in turn order. Both games are very similar, but also have some differences where different units of other players can be acquired or interacted with. You can use the routes that are built by certain units and resources that are gained in Roads and Boats, whereas in Rise and Fall, all the units and resources tend to be self-sufficient, and one of the only points of interaction is in movement of these units across the board, as well as that area control aspect at the end of the game. But yeah, otherwise they're pretty similar. I would say Roads and Boats is more complex and probably more interactive in both positive and negative ways compared to Rise and Fall. That's the major comparison. There aren't a lot of games that are like Rise and Fall. And so moving on to the peer review. So after compiling the comments that people have used on Board Game Geek, both pros and cons for Rise and Fall, ChatGPT summarized the following here. So the pros of Rise and Fall, according to the people who have played it, it has deep strategy and planning. There's not a lot of luck involved, as is evident with the overview of this game. The interactivity of the pieces as well has a really cool table presence. The 3D map that is created is probably awesome, and unfortunately I've not had that experience, but hope to one day. It's an interactive game. It's got Euro-style mechanisms. Another couple of games that people have compared this to are Hansa Teutonica and Concordia. I think Concordia for the hand management and card play, and the Hansa Teutonica aspect of managing a very interactive central board. The rule set is fairly streamlined as well. I basically taught you the entire game, and it really comes down to how you utilize the actions that are depicted with iconography on the cards. You've got the race aspect for those trophies, as well as the area control. Scales well with multiple people, and it really accelerates towards the end game. If you don't pay attention, things can ramp up and end fairly quickly for somewhat of an abstracted, longer looking type of Euro game. A lot of people enjoy the quality of the Kickstarter version of this game, but I will say, and jump down to the issues, there have been some issues with the production of this game and the continuing effort to manage those who have gotten the game. Now, this game is punishing. There is an element of player elimination, and so it does require some forethought in the fact that you could be eliminated and would have to watch everyone else finish up the game. And so it can be lost by turn one, which is very reminiscent of what Splotter games are like. And so if that is a pro or a con to you, it is for me a pro. But if it's a con for you, that's totally fine, and now you know. The initial turns of the start of the game can be kind of slow, and perhaps I've also heard mentioned kind of rote as well. There seems to be one or two tried and true strategies that you start this game with, and it really diversifies at the end of the game or the middle of the game, depending on the guilds and the other aspects that you use to set up the game with. But those first kind of turns can be slow and tedious, as is true with a lot of Splotter games, actually. There's not much tactical flexibility. Once again, this is very much a strategic game and not very tactical or luck-based. And so some people, for all those reasons, feel like it's not as fun of a game. It's really an acquired taste. And, if you do enjoy Splotter games, this game probably would feel closer to home and be more enjoyable. So going into my final thoughts here, and in the criteria that I have personally for what makes a game interesting and fun for me, is overall this game is a 9.2 out of 10, a very high rating and recommendation from me. I think the rules of this game are really easy to learn. Overall, it's a very fun game. It checks off all the boxes that I find very personal and important to me in a game. It's that really strategic kind of fun, a game that I think about after I'm done with it and want to get better at. It reminds me of the strategy, depth that games like Agricola and others like that are. It kind of reminded me of how fun it was to learn and dive deeper into this game, and it's a game that I could watch other people play. I think there is quite a bit of skill in this game and strategy. Now, it doesn't get a perfect 10 because I do feel like the base game itself does feel quite repetitive, and I agree with that. But I think the added modularity of this game, it really makes this game have that variability that's near perfect as well, and it's really replayable. I think it does. And it would really hurt this replayability of this game if you're not playing with those who are at the same level and could potentially be kicked out of the game earlier. And so for that, it's not as replayable and as omnipresent of a game for anyone, essentially. I think you'd have to play this game with people who want to play it, as well as those who are more or less at the same level as you. It has a lot of interaction, not as much as Roads and Boats, as previously mentioned, but just quite enough that it really feels very interactive, especially with the endgame area control scoring. The theme of this game is not... It's fairly abstracted, right? And so we're taking somewhat of a generic / there are some unique aspects of this kind of, medieval civilization type of theme. I mean, you have people riding on elephants and tigers, right? And so that's kind of new and unique about this game. But I think there are some points to be had with the guilds, not the guilds, but like the modular pieces that you can use in this game do give it some flair that I enjoy. It's mostly a mechanical game, but for what it is, which is a kind of abstracted Civ-themed game, I think it does pretty well in replicating the thematic sense of a game like Age of Empires, once again, where there is, you're developing your own civilization, but also having to interact with those around you, whether it's for endgame scoring in this case, vying for different territories to be able to utilize them for resources and points later on, etc., right? And the race to get towards certain goals, right? That reminds me of like the races to build wonders in Age of Empires, for example. So I do feel like this has some theme. It's not as thematic as other people might feel, but I do really enjoy it and give it a high score for that. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's got enough variability strategically, and with the modularity of the board itself, as well as the modules of guilds and other pieces, to make this game feel different every time you play. And so, yeah, a near perfect game for me, very highly rated. As you can see visually, this game is playable online. You can play against other people, against a pirate AI solo mode that is specific, which plays really well. I guess that adds to the solo factor as well. Even if you're playing this by yourself, I think I guess a lot of it is dependent on this AI, which really replicates the multiplayer game very well. And and there's a lot of added variability in terms of difficulty as you get better at this game to make that solo mode really feel challenging and interactive. So I like that as well. So you can play this game. I'll in the notes down below in the description, I will put the Discord link to go to the Rise and Fall official Discord, where you can find the instructions to download an alpha key if you want to play it now. And hopefully in the future, this game will be available on Steam for purchase, and hopefully it'll make it a lot easier for a community of dedicated players to play each other and enjoy this game further and deeper. So I will include that down below. And most likely, especially with all the Kickstarter issues and production issues with the publisher of this game, I feel like this is going to be our best bet to having this game be playable to a wider audience until this game potentially gets a little bit more support analog-wise, right? So all of that to say, excellent game. I highly recommend it. If you enjoy the games that I enjoy, I think this is worth a try. But if you have played this game or have just learned about this game, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thank you for consulting with me today on Rise and Fall. Hope you schedule an appointment with your board gaming doctor real soon. Take